Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 6th of April 2023. Let's go to the discussion bits at the beginning of the ISW daily report. I'm not going to talk about Bakhmut area yet, but a couple of things worthy of mention. The Kremlin is likely increasingly struggling to maintain loyalty among lower level regional authorities as it continues to place the onus of funding the war on Russian federal subjects, and that will include asking those regions to up their volunteers to give towards the war efforts, and that's, one would assume, will become increasingly difficult for them to do. Putin has dismissed Colonel General Nikolai Greshchushkin from his post as deputy head of the Ministry of Emergency Situations on April the 5th. ISW has also previously reported on recent investigations into and arrests of Russian Rosgvardia leadership, including the Naval Department head and deputy commander of Rosgvardia's Central District. And that also includes Muradov being dismissed, and he was in charge of the complete debacle that was the attacks on Vuhledar. So all is not well. These are kind of indications that things are not going well for the Russians. And actually, I want to just dip into something Tendar, who's a German source, has said on his ideas of the Russian Russian offensive, the winter offensive, that has it's just been an abject failure. Pro-Russian voices were saying there's been no offensive. Well, there has been. There's evidence for it, and there's evidence that it's failed. The Russian military did claim that they were going to take the Donbass, and that was their military priority. It hasn't happened, but it does look like they tried to do it. And here is what Tendar says. The Russian winter offensive has entirely failed. We can see that in all sectors, no matter whether you look at Vuhledar, which is down here, Kreminna, Kupiansk, so Kreminna there, Kupiansk, Zaporizhia, and even Bakhmut. The Russian advances were little or not even existent. Russia wasted huge amounts of resources and gained almost nothing in return. On the contrary, they are no more than ever under threat to lose more than now. But that's the next episode. Based on all the Russian attempts, I've drawn maps of their intention. The operation, indeed, was aimed to take the entire Donbass. So the Donbass is going to be, this is the rest of Donetsk, and then the rest of Luhansk. Not too much for them to take, but they've struggled to do even that. As well as all areas east of the Oskil River. So the Oskil River comes down there. So that's going beyond the borders of the Luhansk Oblast to move to the Oskil River. At the east of the Oskil River is that section there. I believe the Russians intended to execute this in 4 phases. So phase 1 would strike and break through Ukrainian lines in Kupiansk, Kreminna, Bakhmut, Avdivka, and Marinka, and Vuhledar, and encircle the cities of the first defense line. So that's what you do. And there was definitely an uptick in activity in all of those places. The Russians have lost loads of equipment there. That shows that the last 3 months there's been an uptick of military activity. They have been on the offensive in those places. That's not controversial. That's incontrovertible. The phase 2, says Tendar, was to break the resistance of those cities and move. So this would be phase 2, and move deeper into the Ukrainian space, starting to encircle the second line of defense, most notably Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. So you have these cities behind Bakhmut that form as kind of semicircle. The idea would be to encircle them so that they would be unable to get supplies into those sort of major hubs. The phase 3 would be to break Ukrainian resistance at the second line of defense, take over the Kramatorsk-Sloviansk area, clear out all the remaining Ukrainian units east of the Oskil River, and launch an attack on Provrovsk and Dobropilya. So this is to take the area up to the Oskil here, to the east of the Luhansk Oblast, and then if we kind of zoom in, to take the Kramatorsk-Konstantinivka kind of semicircle. And then to join up things down the south of Donetsk Oblast, and then strike on Dobropilya and so on and so forth. So you have that being the phase 3, and then phase 4 would be to strike and take over Pokrovsk and Dobropilya, clear out all remaining pockets and conquer the rest of Donetsk Oblast. End of all the offensive operations and fortify this position. And that's what you can see there. And then we go and see what the political conclusion is. So Tendar says the political conclusion is declare victory and offer a ceasefire and demand this to be the new border or line of contact. The areas of the Kharkiv Oblast stay under Russian rule in exchange for Ukraine keeping Kherson and Zaporizhia city. If this Russian operation would have succeeded, Russia would not only gained 13,000 square kilometers of land, but would also have neutralized the bulk of the Ukrainian army. The reality, a bold plan which never made it even over phase one. Epic disaster for Russia. They've taken only 70 odd square kilometers. Literally just a tiny bit of Bakhmut. Like, that's what they've taken. Just a few bits here and there, maybe. It's just been abject failure. And I absolutely stand by that. I agree with that assessment entirely. Anyway, let's move on. So as we come to the northeast sector, which is from Kupiansk to Svatva to Kreminna here, not an awful lot of activity. Here it looks, on my map, we've got Kupiansk there, Svatva here. Let's get the ground lines of communication up. No, that's the wrong button. There we go. So that we get all the roads and we can see now a little bit more clearly what's going on. Svatva there, Kupiansk up here. Okay, so what does ISW have to say about that? There have been Russian sources claiming that Russian forces continue to advance through Ukrainian positions on the outskirts of Makivka and the Zarevka Gully, but no real confirmation of that. That is further down south from Svatva, so you can see nothing happening Kupiansk region down to Svatva, as according to the ISW. Supposedly the Russians are making advances here and here, even though actually it looked like the Ukrainians have been advancing in that area as well. Still unsure of exactly where the lines are there. By the way, Deep State map hasn't really mapped in 2 days, so very limited pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian mapping activities from them, and also from Null Reports, no mapping from them either, and Defmon 2. Just to continue, another Russian source claimed that Russian forces unsuccessfully attempted to advance from the direction of Shiplivka, which is south of Kreminna, towards the forest area, towards the Serebranska forest and near Torska. So that's unsuccessful attacks, and that's according to the Russians around here. There's Shiplivka, so towards the forest area and towards Torska as well. And indeed, Suryat Maps says that the Ukrainians have actually gained some ground in the forest area. So during the last few days, the Ukrainian army retook new ground in the forest area south of Kreminna. The front remains as fluid as it was since November 2022. So that's, that's their bit of, hey, it's fluid. The Ukrainians have gained some ground. Hey, don't worry, it's fluid. But yeah, so which is true, but it's just interesting how they can't just say Ukraine have gained some ground. It has to be sort of couched in such a way, but I guess we will do that to a degree. But anyway, so that's the ISWs. It doesn't say too much more other than geolocated footage shows Russian forces using the TOS-1 thermobaric rocket system and shelling Ukrainian positions south of Kreminna. And there's been these reports of the TOS-1 being used in this area for some time now, and ISW often say that if they use that kind of equipment there, it shows that that's a priority area. But anyway, not too much else to report. Good news for the Ukrainians that they have taken a bit of land there. In fact, if we go to Poulet-Volon's map, I've not seen as much yellow on Poulet-Volon's mapping since, well, kind of ever, because I only started seeing their mapping after the beginning of the Russian offensive. But anyway, they show some increased Ukrainian control in the forest area south of Dubrova. Actually, pretty much in line with my maps. In fact, I would have Ukrainian control even further than that. So, even though there's yellow area there, it is still in line with my mapping. And then we're going to go to Bakhmut. The net is closing in around Bakhmut, but still arguably, in favor of Ukraine. In fact, let's go back to the ISW to see what Zelensky has just said in Poland about Bakhmut. So Ukrainian President Zelensky has stated that the Ukrainian forces will withdraw from Bakhmut to avoid encirclement if necessary, but do not yet assess the need to do so. Zelensky stated during a press conference in Poland on April the 5th that Ukrainian troops face a very challenging situation in Bakhmut and that Kyiv will make the corresponding decisions if Ukrainian troops risk encirclement by Russian forces. Zelensky's statement is in line with other recent statements by Ukrainian officials that Ukrainian military command will order a withdrawal from Bakhmut when and if they deem the withdrawal to be the most strategically appropriate option. So this is the idea that it is still the calculation is still in favor of the Ukrainians to keep hold of Bakhmut or keep defending Bakhmut. While it remains to be seen, says the ISW, whether Ukraine's defense of Bakhmut and its efficacy in fixing Russian forces in the area is worth Ukrainian losses, and we will unlikely be able to assess this until observing the Ukrainian spring counteroffensive. Ukrainian military leadership continues to clearly signal that Ukrainian forces are still not encircled and have the option to withdraw as necessary. And I would agree with that as well. So this is to say that as we come down to Bakhmut, that we have the military agreeing with the assessment. It's not just a kind of political decision here. The military is saying it's still worth us remaining there, and as long as we can use these main supply routes to get out, then that is. It makes sense for us to remain there. So Vuhledar's map shows that the Ukrainians have gained this territory to the southwest, south of the T0504 main supply route that goes in, which is keeping those ground lines of communication open, and that the Russians are struggling to make advances to the northwest near Avdivka. And as you can see, there's only one red arrow according to Vuhledar. The pro-Russian source Rebar says on Telegram, northwest of Bakhmut, says nothing of anything happening north of Bakhmut in terms of conventional warfare. Northwest of Bakhmut, Russian assault units are approaching the outskirts of Avdivka. The loss of control over the settlement would significantly complicate the situation for the Ukrainian grouping in this sector of the front. Well, yeah. In Bakhmut, Wagner PMC assault groups continue their offensive along the entire line of contact. In the southern part of the city, the railway station and residential areas near the central hospital are taken. Russian airspace forces aircrafts are heavily bombarding enemy positions in the northern outskirts of Vuhledar, then goes down to Vuhledar. So that's really the end. Now, if we go to Suryat maps, there is the usual blocks being taken. Not a huge amount of land has been taken by the Russians over the last 24 hours. They have taken a hospital area and reached a penitentiary prison of the city. In addition, troops took control over the remaining houses south of Bakhmutska Street. So some houses there. There was a little pocket that remained under Ukrainian control there, and that is now under the control of the Russians. But that's pretty much it for Bakhmut. Oh no, there's a little bit more. I think that's only just come out in the last hour or so, which is small advances close to the police station. So they surrounded this stadium here from the north and the south, but the stadium still seems to be holding out. As I say, the Deep State Map Pro Ukrainian map hasn't made any mapping the last 2 days, so their yellow lines might be out of date, but the red lines are of Suryat maps, and actually they've now agreed. So funnily enough, the Deep State Map had this area controlled by the Russians yesterday, and Suryat maps didn't. In fact, they went all the way back here. So they've adjusted their maps to go in line with the Deep State Map. And as you can see here, the stadium in the east is being surrounded, and the Russians have made some gains here, just north and south of that stadium. And then there was a pocket that was down here that's being closed up now. So yeah, that's what the Russian lines look like. We'll see if Deep State Map updates their map today, whether they will fall in line with Suryat maps there. I'm just going to change my blue lines to show you now where the Ukrainian control is, which would just be to the other side of the Russian lines. It's a bit more, so when I draw my Ukrainian lines, they are not accurate. So there's just basically, you could argue that almost all of this is grey zone, and it's where the Russians control as the offensive force that is important. Now, there's been this talk about the Ukrainians pulling back to the railway station here, but of course, the railway line. and that would make a lot of sense. Ceding this territory to the east of that, they are still able to use their main supply routes just as effectively as they are right now. The thing about the railway line is a bit like the river that they were using. Uh, if you have Russian forces to the south and the north that have broken that river line of defense, then it's kind of doesn't really matter whether you're holding the river, because they can advance from the north and they can advance from the south, and that's pretty much exactly what happened. Again, with if the Ukrainians take a position along the railway line, and that seems very sensible, that still the railway line means nothing, if you can't hold the north and indeed the south. So that problem would just be exactly the same issue as there was with the Bakhmutivka River. However, that would make a sensible option there, but it's really just about ceding territory for maximum losses for the Russians. Let's go and just have a little look to see what one of my commenters, Defective, says on the usefulness, the utility of defending Bakhmut and why it's important. He says, why is Bakhmut important? I think this is just worth having a chat about. Geographically, it has, at the very best, limited local strategic value. It's one of several crossings of a minor river. Its geography is somewhat advantageous to the defense. The surrounding geography is not any more or less conducive to aiding follow-on attacks than most other areas in this part of the east of Ukraine. There is nothing geographically that makes Bakhmut worth defending or taking. Militarily, it is of marginal comparative utility. It is not along a ground line of communication to resupply like Svatova. It is not a latent envelopment. Chasiv Yar defends behind it. Whoever holds Bakhmut will not have any advantage on their enemy. So there is no kind of intrinsic value to Bakhmut in taking it or defending it or keeping it. Economically, it is as ruined as the rest of Russia's targets have become. It has a train line and yard, but which runs along the front lines, and the entire rail line has been heavily targeted by artillery on both sides. It had some industry, machinery, since evacuated, and buildings since ruined in the conflict. It is on top of, but not required in the exploration of, local mineral and petroleum resources. It has local farmland. That is all. Politically, the only strategic values Bakhmut holds is the name recognition it holds with the public, and the fact that major actors have staked some form of their own influence on the taking or holding of the city. It is not a major population center. It is not a regional hub. It is not a capital. And yeah, that's enough. Enough value for the city to be fought over. And here's the why. Ukraine needed that city to be fought over. Not Bakhmut specifically, and not Bakhmut alone, but Ukraine needed to ensure that they could prevent Russian force regeneration over the winter. I always thought that this war would be 2 weeks or 2 years, and in that, I and everyone else in the geopolitical game thought that if they really knew what they were doing militarily, the Russians would take an operational pause this winter. A theatre-wide operational pause would give them the opportunity to claim that there had never been a war. See, the West is insane, which might sound impossible, but recall that they were doing exactly that up to the day they invaded, and even for a week or two afterwards, there was a big push for a special military operation narrative. Recall the bots and trolls in the channel right now. Using that narrative, the Kremlin could have worked out how to galvanize Western opinions while reconstituting his force. Russia would have a better army, and since attacks had stopped and we in the West love to be fooled, support would not have been at the levels which it has been. Thus, Ukraine's army would be less well equipped with Western supplies and support. Russia would not have had a better opportunity to achieve an actual strategic victory than this spring, after reconstituting their forces and addressing their deficiencies. Russia knew that. Ukraine knew that. The US knew that. So there had to be a way to prevent it. That would mean one of two possibilities. Either Ukraine would have to go and fight the Russians, launching their own winter offensive, or they would have to find a way to make the Russians come to them. Attacking over winter is never ideal, and while this has been a mild Ukrainian winter, this couldn't have been known ahead of time. So for the Western planners, the best method was to coerce the Russians to launch their own offensive, which was determined by the best way to do this, and was to identify a series of otherwise locally important cities and fight for them as if they were nationally critically important. So it is no accident that the city everyone knows of, Bakhmut, is along the split in operational command between two competing Russian military officials. The Russian military may pay soldiers, but it is not a professional force. It is an influence-oriented force, and Prigozhin and Shoigu have been competing for influence. To get Russia to commit, it needs not to convince Putin that it is important to Russia. It needs to only convince Shoigu or Prigozhin that it's important to their own influence. When a Russian commander commits his own reputation to a fight, it is win or lose influence. So Ukraine needed to get Russia to not reconstitute its force to avoid the Russian spring offensive. To get favorable casualties, Ukraine needed to not disrupt this by launching their own offensive. To do this, they needed to get Russia to commit their own offensive. So in the context of Putin committing to take all of the Donbass by winter's end, Ukrainian officials all the way up to Zelensky have stated that Bakhmut is of importance. They have defended it like they refuse to accept the consequence of losing it. They have done this at city after city up and down the Donbass line. Some places have gone better for them than others, but the fight had to happen to prevent Russia from having a good chance to win. Michael Kaufman hinted at this recently when he said that Ukraine needs more Vuhledars and fewer Bakhmuts. I've avoided saying this yet because of my old work, but while it is absurdly unlikely any Russian troll or data farmer would believe any of the above, the time has passed since when they believing them would do any good. Them believing would do any good. Russia was prevented from regenerating its force over winter. Western support for Ukraine has grown over winter, not been diminished. Russia knows now that the Ukrainian offensive is coming. They probably already knew where it will happen. It is too late for knowing to do them any good. That is why Bakhmut has been important. It has served its strategic value, and even if it was abandoned today, it is of little geographic, military, or economic value, and soon Ukraine will have new victories to offset its political value. This may end up being how Russia lost its political war, political infighting that made it blind to reality and has shot its last shot. The offensive begins soon. That I'm sorry. I felt I had to read the whole of that. It's super important because Bakhmut is, I think, it will be seen potentially as a hugely successful point of the war, and Ukrainians, Russians, sorry, pro-Russian voices will laugh at that. They say that's pure cope. Ukrainians, I think, if they walked out of Bakhmut now, it has been a success. It's been a hugely costly success to the Ukrainians. I don't deny that, but it has fixed the Russians in place. It has not allowed them to regenerate. It has exhausted their forces, and all the while the Ukrainians have had time to ring fence a whole bunch of troops, to train them, to bring in equipment, and to be able to commit properly to a spring counteroffensive, having not lost Bakhmut even yet. So I think it's massively important, and thanks so much for Defective for putting that to his thoughts down in the thread. Really appreciate that. Right, what else has happened in the area? Here's a mortar, a self-propelled mortar, having a massive explosion just by Klishchivka. And the reason I'm showing you this is because the counter battery work that's been done around Bakhmut is really important. There have been artillery losses consistently around the area. Reporting from Ukraine did a really good video on that recently, and this is super important for, that's where that self-propelled mortar was lost. It pretty much in Klishchivka, but it's super important if the Ukrainians want to either counterattack around here or not lose as many troops. They need to take out Russian artillery in all its forms, mortar and self-propelled guns and howitzers. Anyway, let's move on down south to Avdivka. I spent far too long on Bakhmut there. Okay, if we go to Poulet-Volon's maps, we can see, sorry, that's what's going on the urban map of Bakhmut. And then we are moving on to Avdivka. And again, yellow lines, yellow areas of Ukrainian counterattacks, regaining land to the north of Novobakhmutivka, and to the south near Vodyane, Pervomaysky, and Opitny, this kind of area there. Now, I don't think that actually changes my maps. I'm not quite sure of that, all that yellow in place there. But there has been, Syriac Maps does report themselves that there were gains for the Ukrainians by Bakhmutivka. So some small advances trying to expand a buffer zone around Bakhmutivka town. On the other hand, a few kilometers east of Ukrainian. So the Russians have made a few gains there. But on the other hand, the Ukrainians launched a counter attack, a new attack, and managed to capture some positions adjacent to the town of Novoselivska. And I talked about that yesterday, and it's interesting that Syriac Maps is agreeing that there has been some regained positions there. So a tiny bit of gain for the Russians around here, it seems, but they've lost some ground over in the Novoselivska area. And in fact, the Ukrainians, according to Syriac Maps, are knocking on the door of that settlement. They're right next to Novoselivska itself, and the Ukrainians can take advantage of a weakness there and start pushing south here from their lines. Then actually that might draw away troops, offensive troops from Bakhmutivka, from Krasnoyarivka, and from Avdivka itself. So that could be a useful counterattack there to help to aid the defense of Avdivka as a whole. Now, I hate it when I forget to say things. There's something about Bakhmut I forgot to say, and the pro-Russians will have a right go at me for this. There's been thermobaric munitions being used in Bakhmut, TOS-1A thermobaric strikes. These are really effective weapons to use in urban terrains. I had an argument with a pro-Russian some time back who was saying, these are good for hitting troops out in the open. Yeah, no, it's much more effective, I think, in urban areas, this. And here is the thermobaric munition being used, and that can sort of vaporize if it gets the correct kind of hit and whatnot. It can vaporize human bodies and in certain areas. So that's going to be a pretty horrific thing to be using in Bakhmut. So that has been used there. In fact, I wonder exactly where. I wonder if there's a geolocation of that. Yes, really sorry to go back to Bakhmut, but here is a geolocation of that thermobaric hit, that barrage. So interesting that is actually behind the lines there. So that might be a few days old or sometime back, but that's at least that's according to the geolocation from here, unless that's where it was sent from. But anyway, that is being used in Bakhmut. Actually, you can see that's near. Is that the waterline there? So anyway, that would be the waterline. So it could well be there. So it might not be from the last 24 hours, but that footage is coming out now. Anyway, back to Avdivka. As I was talking about, and I do hate jumping around like that. I really apologise, but sometimes my brain forgets to say things. So the ISW says about Avdivka that there are, repelled attacks all the way around it. Russian ground attacks near Avdivka, northwest of Avdivka, Novokalinove, west of Avdivka near Severny, southwest near Pervomaisky, and then it goes on to talk about Marinka. Now, Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian forces made unspecified advances near Severny and Pervomaisky and attacked near Avdivka, north of Avdivka and Keramik, southwest of Avdivka near Krasnoyarivka. And Marinka. So the Russians are claiming lots of attacks. The Ukrainians are claiming they've been repelled. The Russians are claiming, well, there've been some unspecified advances there. And we're pretty much back to where we started. Some Russian mill bloggers denied April the 4th reports that Ukrainian forces made a breakthrough near Avdivka. But geolocated footage from April the 4th shows that Ukrainian forces have advanced to positions west of Bakhmutivka. It remains unclear whether Ukrainian forces maintain those positions. And these are sort of trench positions that were attacked. And if we go and look at the geolocation for those trench positions, that is here. And lo and behold, it tracks exactly with what Syriac Maps has said, which is that Ukrainians have advanced next to Novoselivka there. So that all kind of matches up with what Syriac Map says, what ISW say, and what my map is now reflecting. But other than that, you have your, I don't know that there's any confirmed changes of territory around there, even though Vuhledar suggests that over time, there have been regained areas for the Ukrainians in that Avdivka area. Indeed, so let's go and look at further down south, and I think Vuhledar has some Marinka map here. So we move on to the Marinka area, and you can see that there's a yellow. Again, we've got the yellow up here near Pervomaisky, and we have the yellow regained territory around Pobjeda to south of Marinka, and the Ukraine is pushing back in Marinka with no red arrow there. So that's what we've heard over the last few days, but there hasn't really been much information about that. So let's come out of Avdivka and go to Marinka here. I still have undecided mapping, I guess you could say, north of Marinka. So there's not really much else to say about Marinka there. So we'll come out, but it could be that the Ukrainians are on the attack there and not the Russians. And this seems to be the case in a number of places. So, again, that feeds into the idea that the Russians have culminated, that they've got, nowhere else to go. They've run out of, they've exhausted their forces and what have you. Okay, and that's going back to a Bakhmut map that's a little bit out of position there. So we'll leave Poulet-Volant, go back to my map now. No real news about Vuhledar, but there are some claims concerning Dorozhnyanka there, which is in the Zaporizhia Oblast, south of Vuhledar. The ISW says a Russian source claimed that Russian forces broke through Ukrainian defensive in eastern Zaporizhia Oblast. Yesterday, one Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces made unspecified gains from the Dorozhnyanka up the T0401 highway towards Mariupol, but ISW is unable to confirm those claims. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces did not conduct any offensive operations in Western Donetsk, and that would be sort of including Vuhledar area. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that the Russian forces repelled 3 Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups in Western Donetsk. So the Ukrainians themselves on the attack in that area, and that kind of sort of leads us to the usual sort of bits and pieces about Kherson and Zaporizhia in terms of there being there's fighting around the nuclear power plant, or there's news about the nuclear power plant. I think it turns up in so in Rebar's Telegram account of what took place yesterday, actually, they do mention Vuhledar. So Russian aerospace forces aircraft are heavily bombarding enemy positions in the northern outskirts of Vuhledar. Modernized Fab 500 air munitions, so they're their answers to the JDAM with guidance on board, GPS guidance and fins. Air munitions equipped with a little wing unit with a planning and correction module are used. The Ukrainian regime continues to carry out attacks against Zaporizhia nuclear power plant infrastructure. That is the claim of Rebar. Electronic warfare equipment managed to neutralize a Polish-made drone near the plant. In the Kherson region, the Ukrainians have shelled settlements on the left bank of the Dnipro. Artillery shells damaged residential buildings and no casualties were reported. That's what Rebar says. Of course, the Ukrainians claim that the Russians are doing that themselves across Kherson. And they make the claims about it's the Russians that are attacking the nuclear power plant. Anyway, that's the end of the Frontline update. Sorry, it's been a long one. I did want to do a little bit analysis on Bakhmut, but that's what's been happening along the front lines. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate your continued support. Thanks for hanging out here, and thanks for your wonderful comments. And hey, if they are wonderful, they get featured. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.